Well, this is a personal insight into policing. So there'll be quite a lot of personal stuff about what I've done, what I'm doing. And we'll ask some questions at the end. Obviously, I'm not political or anything like that, and it's quite sensitive in relation to elections at the moment. So there might be some questions you ask me which I might have to say I can't answer. However, I just wanted to give you an insight into local policing and reassure you that local policing is here in Eastbourne and we are committed to it. And you might not see all of it, but I just want to go over a lot of the stuff that we do in relation to that. Some of it you may know, some of it you may not know. But a bit about me first. Sandy said a bit. So I am Eastbourne. I'd love to say born and bred, but I'm not, okay? I moved to Eastbourne when I was 9 years of age. I was born in a town that had concrete cows in it, okay? Milton Keynes, for those of you know. And I was born around in 1971, around the time when the first biggest shopping centre in Europe was being built. So that is, but we always used to come to lovely Eastbourne for our holidays. So my dad was a solicitor and had a practice in Buckingham, and decided that he'd like to finish his practice there and move to Eastbourne. So fantastic, eh? So at the age of 9, I moved to Eastbourne and been here ever since. So I always say that I'm Eastbourne. Although not born and bred, I think I can come under that. So I love Eastbourne, and I really do love Eastbourne. And I know there has been changes in Eastbourne, as there has in every town. But I'm married, house in Eastbourne, 4 children, 2 grandchildren. Can you believe that? 2 grandchildren. And my 2 eldest sons, one's a teacher in Eastbourne. My second son's a firefighter in Eastbourne. My 2 girls, one goes to college in Eastbourne, one to a school in Eastbourne. My wife was a physio in Eastbourne Hospital and then went into management in the NHS. So Eastbourne plays a major part in our life. And a lot of my decisions have been made on Eastbourne seafront. So I've done a lot of praying, meditating on Eastbourne seafront, and I've run up and down Eastbourne seafront since I was the age of 12 or 13. So I love Eastbourne seafront. But I tend to fall over quite a lot. So please, right, even when I'm walking the beat, I'm very clumsy, and as my colleagues say to me, so there's been occasions when I've misjudged things and fallen flat on my face on Eastbourne seafront. But that's how much I love Eastbourne and the surrounds. I've lived in Langley, I've lived in Langley Point, and I now live along King's Drive. But I was brought up in the Meads area. So my father and mother had a house in Meads, so that's where my connection to where I am now, which I'll go on to explain. I'm the Meads, Lower Meads, and a bit of town centre community support officer. So why did I join the police? There's always a big question. Why did I join the police? Well, the brutal, simple answer is my mum told me I had to. Okay? That is the brutal, honest truth. I thought I might follow my father's footsteps and be a solicitor, but that didn't work out, and I was a bit unemployed, and my mum said, for goodness sake, son, get yourself out of the house and get yourself a job. There's an application going for Sussex Police. So, 21 at the time, she says, try and make something of your life. I had never considered it before. So I went for an interview in April 1992. There's a 2-day assessment centre. I think my voice had just about broken then, and I just about started shaving. Because that's me. On my second day in the police. So I was interviewed eventually I got through the first day of assessments. I was interviewed by a superintendent and someone else. And they asked me a few questions, and they basically said to me, you're very immature, but we'll take a risk with you. And that's been the story of my career, really. Never's changed. Very immature, but we'll take a risk with you. And I'm very grateful that they allowed me to have the opportunity to actually come into Sussex Police. So July the 6th, 1992, I was sworn in as a warranted officer. And in those days, we wore blue shirts, a black tie, trousers, handcuffs, and that was it. So all this equipment we have now, we never used to have at all. Had a truncheon, do you remember the old truncheons? I've still got that. I was hoping one day it'd be worth about £3,000 or £4,000, but I don't think it is. And an old-fashioned police helmet, which I've still got. I haven't returned it when I retired, so don't let Sussex Police know that I've kept some uniform, will you? Please don't do that. Okay, so my career has been varied. They posted me initially away from my hometown because I was young, free and single then when I joined. So my first 3 years were done in Bognor. But then I got married and I wanted to come back to live in Eastbourne. So they said, we can't give you Eastbourne, but we can give you Hastings. So that's where my career around Hastings and Rother started. And most of my career was done around that area as a police officer. And after about 9 years, I was quite happy as a police constable. And so, do you know why I went for promotion? Because my wife said I had to, all right? And that is exactly true, okay? So it took me ages to pass the exam. Anyway, I managed to become promoted to sergeant in 2000 for various jobs in custody sergeant. Actually, I did a bit of work at Eastbourne at the old police station, the old Grove Road, you know, the top of the old Grove Road? As custody sergeant there for 2 years. And then I did various roles. But then I became a community sergeant in Bexhill, where I was a PC, because that's where my love for community policing happened, because I was Sidley Beat officer for 4 years, and that's where I knew that that's where I loved and maybe where my talents lied. So for 3 or 4 years, I walked the streets of Sidley and Bexhill, and that's where my love affair with community policing happened. And I continued that as a sergeant. I was a Battle and Bexhill sergeant, and then somehow around about 2013 I managed to pass another exam and get promoted to the rank of inspector. Never thought I'd ever make that. And once again it was all community policing. And then right at the end I had a call from the Chief Constable's office. If you have a call from the Chief Constable's office, you answer it. So Chief Constable then, Giles York, one of the Assistant Chief Constables, phoned and said, would I be interested in applying for a role of being his staff officer? So I thought I'd better apply. So I applied, and for my last 18 months of Chief Constable Giles York's career, I was his staff officer. So I was working with him in headquarters, and that was the most fantastic 18 months I had. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and we became firm friends, and I saw him out to his retirement, and he still contacts me regularly about stuff we did, and it's such a privileged position, but I couldn't have done it without all the experience of policing. So for me, that was the top of neighbourhood policing, because you got the Chief Constable, and we just go to all these meetings and all that, and I can tell you many funny stories, but I won't, because we've kept them to ourselves. But we became firm friends, and he contacts me a lot. So I saw him out to his retirement. In the last 2 years of my career, I was a response inspector for East Sussex on night shift again, and I can't believe I did that until my last day in 30 years after I joined in July 2022, and that's Chief Constable Joe Shiner, who took over from Giles York, giving me my long service presentation and a medal, and that was my last day. So I left the police station in tears. Did, because it's a big thing, handing in your warrant card, because it's been your life for 30 years. You have built up fantastic relationships with people. And the person who I left the police station with was a colleague that I worked with for years in Hastings, and our careers came together. I mentioned his name was Julian Williams, because he retired 3 years before me as a sergeant, and he became a PCSO. So he's still now walking the streets of Eastbourne as a retired sergeant. So he was the first sergeant to become a PCSO. So he kept saying to me before I retired, come on, right? You can become a PCSO. And of course, him and I used to supervise PCSOs and PCs and other bits in the community. I never thought that would be for me. Well, 8 weeks later, I became a PCSO. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that my wife said I'd get out of the house. Anything like that at all, believe me, and nothing to do with that. But I thought about it, and I thought, what was the best bits about policing for me? The best bits about policing was meeting the community, engaging with the community, making relationships with the community, walking the beat, making a difference every day, if I could do, supporting colleagues. So where could I do it? And so this is what I became. So PCSO Dan Russell came into being in some point towards 2022, and I've been 20 months now in this role. And I'll be fair to say it took a bit of adjustment, okay, without the powers as such and other bits. And of course, all the people that were supervising me, I supervised them before. But I think that I hopefully didn't turn too many bridges. And one of the things I wanted to was do my hometown. So that's one of the things I asked. Do you know what? I had to find my O-level certificates again. They'd lost them. I said, I can't find them. And they thought, well, I can't get back in. I thought, I've been here 30 years and I can't find them. Anyway, thankfully, the head of HR that I knew very well managed to get me back in and pave the way. But I asked for Eastbourne. I asked because I wanted to support police, my home community. And that might have some issues in relation to stuff because I live in there, but actually I thought it was time that I gave back to Eastbourne what it had given to me. And that's why I came. And I didn't ask for Meads or Lower Meads because that was my home, where I was brought up, but that's what they gave me. And I don't work from Hammond's Drive, I work from Grove Road, so I work from the Grove Road police station, which is good for me because I was away from people that I worked with for years, and a lot of people got very confused because they started calling me sir again and realised that I wasn't, and they got very confused. And I said, look, I am just Dan, just remember that. I'm just Dan, that's all I am. And so then I was born. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about community policing. The first thing I want to speak to you about is, and this is the corporate slide in relation to what we do as Sussex Police. And this is the priorities that have given to us, rightly so, by Chief Constable Joe Shiner. And those are to protect, catch and deliver. So primarily we're there to protect the public. And that's around the most vulnerable people, particularly those in relation have the biggest threat, harm and risk. So it's only right that we protect the public. And that could be youngsters, that could be anyone. So we protect people, and we do a lot of things around domestic violence, around human trafficking, but actually when I walk out and speak to people and they speak to me about all the issues, so many people are vulnerable and need protecting. So that's what we do firstly. Secondly, we catch the bad people. And that's important for us because we are an enforcement agency, therefore it's important that we do actually catch the bad people. Yes, policing has changed over 32 years. Of course it is. I used to do my charge sheets on a typewriter. And now we've got, and I spoke to a youngster who just joined the police. He said, I once saw a typewriter in a museum. I thought, my goodness me, this is where we go from here. Okay. Yes, policing has changed. Okay. Of course it has. Society has changed with it. But actually, we still catch the bad people and lock them up. And you might ask me, do you get frustrated when they get released from court or don't put from prison? Yeah, at times. But actually, for me, it's just making sure I do the right thing in relation to protecting people and still catching the bad people. Even though I don't have the powers, I get other people to make arrests and all that, but actually get all the evidence to do that. And the last thing is to deliver a good service. Now, you may have had a poor service from Sussex Police, as some people do, or a good service. But ultimately, I try and give the best service that I can. And for me, service is making yourself available, speaking with people who are victims of crime, saying, look, we can't do anything, but here are my email details. If I can help you in the future, please do. And being honest and open with people about, no, we can't investigate this, or this is the reason why we couldn't prosecute them, and actually have that two-way engagement. Okay, so it's vitally important that I give, and we often say in policing that policing is not, we're not here to serve ourselves as officers, we're here to serve the public. And I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that, because it can get quite gutty at times, as you probably understand, with the people we deal with, the long hours we do. And actually sometimes you think, oh no, not again, and other bits and pieces, but ultimately we're there to serve you. And you might talk to me about some poor service you've had, and I understand that, and I deal with people that are upset about service they've had from Sussex Police, but I try my best. Not always perfect, but I try my best. So those are three things that we do. So whenever anyone works on behalf of Sussex Police, whether staff, whether officers, the whole thing, that's what we're there to do. So Eastbourne is divided local policing wise into 3 zones. I'll talk about those in a minute, but local policing, as in the PCSOs for local policing, right, are only a small cog in a big wheel. So we are, if you like, the visible side of policing a lot. But don't forget that there's local police officers, PCSOs, PCs and sergeants, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there's a response team as well. So the response team work 24/7 from Hammonds Drive, cover the whole of East Sussex, and I was the inspector for a section before I retired. So you've got response officers. You have got a whole investigation team from CID and investigations in relation to crime. You've got serious crime investigators, you've got public protection units, you have got firearms, you've got dogs, you have got traffic officers. You've got a whole realm of people that can come into Eastbourne any time and police it. So a lot of people talk about numbers and what are numbers like in relation to what it was years back, but I talk about actually what is available. So the other day I had an issue in the town centre and had a bit of an argy-bargy with someone, and I called for assistance, and there were 6 officers that came from all over the place to assist me, okay? One was from my team, but others from other teams. So don't ever forget that policing is 24/7. So I'm just not I might be just the visible side of policing, but behind that there's a whole raft of policing. So Eastbourne is divided into 3 areas for local policing. So this is my area, my team's area, which is area 1, which is Meads, Lower Meads and the town centre, Devonshire Ward. Okay, so we are right in my area. So I'm actually getting plus points for actually being visible in my area. So thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, so I do Meads, Lower Meads, which is interesting around policing. I'll talk about when people see you or don't, but I do a lot. But in the summer, I concentrate a lot on the seafront because there are issues on the seafront. But I do mainly all the hotels as well. So we're bang in the middle of my area, Meads, Lower Meads, but we also are the town team, so I do a lot of the town stuff. So we go up to the Sovereign Centre and that sort of area of town. But mainly the other officers are involved in the town centre itself. So we are one team. Then there's another team that do Upperton, Old Town, Hampden Park, that sort of area. So they're the second team, and the last team do St Anthony's, Sovereign in that area. So three teams, and we all work separate shift patterns. So at one time there'll be 2 teams on, either day or late shift, and then a team on rest days. But we all cover each other's areas when there are issues. So I've got some issues at the moment at the pier, which you might or not be aware of. So I've got other officers from other sections to help me when I'm on days off, to actually assist me with that, and we'll do vice versa. So each team has a team of PCSOs, usually around about 4, just depends of those, because a lot of PCSOs become police officers. It's interesting, when I'm out on the street, some of the people say to me, why don't you become a police officer? I thought, I've never thought about that. But a lot of people, it's a way in to become a police officer. So a lot of people do 2 or 3 years, but a lot of people stay for 10, 15, 20 years. Some of them, PCSOs have been going for 22 years, and we've got one that was the original joiner, Martin, who's done 22 years. So we've got a team of 4, 5 PCSOs per team. Then we have 1 police officer, or sometimes 2 police officers per team, and a sergeant. So that's our teams in relation to local policing. So that's where we are. So when you see another officer before, ask them if they're neighbourhood policing, because that's what we are, or response officers, and they'll tell you, who they do and who they work for. So that's our team, and we work shifts, 8 to 5 days and 2 to 11 evenings. So we don't work night shifts. So if you've got a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd love to help you, but I can't, okay? If it is a prolific problem, then we might do some night shifts and actually hide up in the shed somewhere and grab someone who's doing some stuff. But we usually finish at 11 o'clock. But remember, policing continues without us because it's 24/7. So there's a picture, if you can see it, of someone putting on a shoe. So I'm going to talk to you about what I do and what officers do in local policing. For me, the key thing is to be visible. How am I visible? By walking. Okay? So if you like, I am an old-fashioned officer. That I love walking. One is that Sussex Police pay me, because my pay, I don't volunteer, this is a paid role. Sussex Police pay me to keep fit. Fantastic, eh? But secondly, this is where I meet my community. And actually the conversations I have day in, day out are amazing. Now, people's reactions are very interesting when you're on the beat, okay? I always try and say good morning to people, even when it's afternoon, because I forget it's the, right. Some people will react straight away and say, good morning, officer, lovely to see you. Other people will completely ignore you. Other people will feel that it's their turn to be abusive to you even though they don't know you and immediately call you plastic. And, yep. But other people, because you're a PCSO, refuse to speak to you because you're not a police officer. And that is the older generation. Would you believe that? So I meet some people who ask me whether I'm a real police officer or not, and usually it's the older generation. And actually one of my colleagues, they literally turned 360 degrees to see what was on the back of their stab vest, and because it said Police Community Support Officer, says, well, I'm not speaking to you, and walked off. I can't understand that, can you? And actually, I'm a person that would challenge certain things like that, because they're the people that will need our help if they need our help. But this is just a minority, but I'm not there to be called plastic, so I actually have conversations with the younger people about that, and they are quite taken aback at sometimes that they're actually challenged about what they say. And we have conversations and try and have some dialogue around that. And a lot of people that have called me plastic and say I've got no powers suddenly realise that when I call for help, there are people that have those powers and they spend 24 hours at Her Majesty's pleasure. So it's very interesting, and some people, and I don't, will say to me, I walk the seafront probably 100 out of the days I do. I'm probably there about, twice or three times a shift, yeah. So I meet some people, local. I've never seen a police officer before, and I lived here for 10 years, and I walk the seafront every day. So I say, that's fine. I've never met you before. We have some dialogue. It's very interesting, isn't it? What people's perception. Other people. And some of you have seen me, will always come, it's nice to see you again, I saw you. And I remember public came to me yesterday when I was walking and says, you're Dan, aren't you? I said, yes. I said, you helped me out with the problem with Croft Court. I can't remember it, but thank you so much. And that makes such a difference, right? I don't remember everyone I deal with, but they remember the contact that I have, and that's important for me to get that contact right. But when I was Sidley Beat Officer, every single day I used to walk to Sidley up a road called Buxton Drive from the old police station. And I went to a public meeting after 3 years, and a woman in Buxton Drive said to me, I've never seen a police officer walk in Buxton Drive. So I made an issue of ringing her doorbell every time I went by and waving to her and saying, how are you? So it's, some people don't see you, some people do. But another funny story is I in the winter wear a yellow jacket, and I always do because it's visible and it's warmer. But I had, for about 2 weeks, every single dog come up to me when I'm walking in the Holywell area of the seafront and just stopping at me and barking at me. And I thought, my goodness me, have I got some sort of smell on me or something like that? And then after 2 weeks, someone came up to me and said, do you know why they're doing that? And I said, no. They said, well, there's a chap that walks every day with a yellow jacket with dog treats, and they think you're him. So I do have some interesting experiences when I'm on foot patrol, but a lot of my time is done on foot patrol, and it's interesting because the control room gets quite frustrated sometimes because they say, can you go to here? I said, well, it's 5 miles away. I'm happy to do that, but I've got quite a long ETA. Sometimes I have to use the cars, okay? But actually, driving past a person, I have to get to places quite quickly sometimes, so that's fine. But actually driving past a person, they don't see anyone, do they? The cars are needed, particularly for response. It'd be ridiculous if response walked everywhere, but I actually tutor new recruits. In fact, I had to go on a 3-day course to have the privilege of tutoring new recruits at PCSOs, even though I started tutoring 28 years ago. But I had to have another 3-day course on it, okay? But anyway, I did that. And I'm notorious for walking people, and I have walked people, and they have ended up in A&E because of it, because of injuries and all that. But I'm a sort of person that if I can walk, I will walk. So if you see me about, please come and speak to me, because I think that's vitally important in relation to what I do. And I've met some lovely people. Absolutely fantastic people. And there's some people that don't feel free to come to a police station to report it, but actually because I'm walking about, they've come to me and said, I've got this real issue, can you help me with it? Are you okay with that? So it has tremendous benefits in relation to community policing and walking, which I'd agree. So there's a picture of St John's Church in Meads. So another part of my role is I engage with the places of worship faith community in Eastbourne. Personally, I'm a member of a church in Eastbourne in Seaside, so I have a lot of connections in the Christian community already, but I engage with all the faith communities. That's a big part of our role, that we engage with the communities and get their trust. And how do you get their trust? By going to meet them, speaking with them, spending time with them, and actually talking through their issues. So I've been to most churches in Eastbourne. I also link in with the Jewish community. I'm also the mosque liaison officer, so where you'll see me, I'm out there on a Friday afternoon liaising with all the community. So each one of the PCSOs will have an engagement role in addition to what their areas are in relation to engagement. Okay, so other people have a disability engagement role, other people have LGBT plus role and other bits. So there is engagement officers. So a lot of my work is done in linking in. So if there's a crime in a place of worship, then I will link in with the leaders of those places and spend time with them and speak with them. And if there's a national issue, and obviously we know there are national issues and tensions nationally, then I will speak with those various people, and I've got their trust, and they will speak to me about the concerns they have, and I can actually go in and speak with them and say, from a policing point of view, this is what we can do, or this is what we can't do. So it's vitally important I get the trust of the community. And oftentimes it's as very simple as going there, speaking to them, doing a job for them, doing it as best as I can, and you've got that trust. So on my phone, I have a number of contacts, and I put their name and I put their role beside it, right? Because I forget, because many people phone me. So I do the work with the food bank, and when the person, my link with the food bank, their surname is food bank. Right, because then I know exactly, because it's a nightmare, isn't it, when you pick the phone and they call you by your first name and you have no idea who it is and what you've done with them and other bits and pieces. So I always link it in, but I probably have in the faith community about 20-25 key contacts that will contact me in relation to issues and get their trust, which I can feed back up to the powers that be in relation to there are concerns around this, how can we help them with that. So in addition to my own area and all that, I am the places of worship engagement officer. I tend to try and visit as many places as possible, but that isn't a lovely church building. It's in Meads. It's very nice. So there is an example of that with the street pastors that Sandy mentioned when I first met Sandy. She hasn't changed a bit, all right, I can tell you that. So I got heavily involved in the street pastors in Bexhill, and then when I came back to Eastbourne and started this role, so there we are giving a £5,000 cheque from Sussex Police from our police property fund to support the street pastors in Eastbourne. I've also got some funding, had some funding for the Friends of Eastbourne Seafront. They're doing a magnificent job and managed to get some money in relation to that. So that's another thing that we do, is that we can apply as PCSOs for money for local causes. And the police property fund is when we take stuff off criminals and we sell it in auction, yeah? So the people that have committed crime, actually, we get the funds for that and actually pay for some good causes, which is a very good idea, isn't it, in relation to that? So there's an example of the engagement work that we do. Right. So I'm not going to sing you the theme song of Neighbours. I'm not going to ask you when Neighbours first came out. But we are problem solvers as local police, and a lot of our issues are with neighbour disputes. Okay, I could write a whole book, okay, on the various neighbour disputes I've dealt with over the years. All right, and if you've been involved in a neighbour dispute and you've got a bad neighbour, it's difficult. It really is challenging for you, isn't it, in relation to that? So a lot of our stuff, you might not see us on the streets, but a lot of our stuff is dealt with by problem solving, and a lot of them in relation to neighbour disputes. So, you know, I've got 6 or 7 ongoing at the moment, okay? And they take up quite a lot of time, and ultimately we may not be able to resolve them. It's interesting what people phone the police for about anyway. But we can't resolve them, but we can actually try and support them and help them. So a lot of our day job is dealing with local neighbourhood disputes. So we could come into work and there could be on our active queue, which is what the jobs outstanding, we could have 15 jobs that we need to attend as well. So it's not just visible policing on foot, it's not just our engagement, it's also about dealing with those issues, and sometimes they can take 3, 4, 5 hours at a time. We actually do get supported by the mediation service, and what I say to people in neighbour disputes is, I can't solve it for you. A lot of the time, if there's no criminality, usually noise, but actually if you speak to each other through mediation, it might help. Okay, so just playing a picture is that that's a lot of work we do around neighbour disputes and other bits and pieces, and noisy bins and other bits, and you know, you might think that's not a policing matter, but actually if we don't get involved it could escalate. So we've got to try and reduce the risk around that. And there are some people that have nightmare neighbours next to them, which I always try and put myself as an officer in their position, in their shoes, and think, how would I feel if I was living with that? And I think that's important for me, and I think that's important for other officers, so that we can actually say, okay, this is what we can do or can't do. There's a lovely picture of Beachy Head. Beachy Head is part of my area. The Beachy Head chaplains do a fantastic work up there, and Sussex Police and Chief Constable Joe Shiner has supported them in revamping the Beachy Head chaplaincy hut. But as you know, Beachy Head is connected with some very sad tragedies in such a lovely place. And Eastbourne's a unique place to police because it has Beachy Head. So a lot of the time, officers on a daily basis are up Beachy Head speaking with people that sadly want to end their lives. So we could spend 3, 4, 5, 6 hours with one individual near the edge. And that takes 2 or 3 officers and specialist negotiators. So Eastbourne's unique in that way. Other people do sadly take their lives in other areas, but it's usually the local people that do that. But, excuse me, a lot of the people that sadly take their lives or want to take their lives in Beachy Head are people that are out of Sussex. So in my old role as inspector, we used to get a lot of concerns from other forces about people, you know, from Scotland even, that have come, are vulnerable and want to kill themselves or harm themselves, and they've done some work on their media and it looks like they're in Beachy Head. So it is quite unique policing, and although as local officers we don't necessarily get involved with that, leave it to police officers, we're often up there actually cordoning off scenes and other bits and pieces. So that is a challenge in relation to Eastbourne policing Beachy Head, and we do a lot of work with the chaplains and things like that. But it's important that I mention that because it is unique to Eastbourne, and it's the most loveliest place, isn't it? And sadly, it's not an age thing. Old and young alike feel. But what I would say is the interventions that the chaplains do and the interventions that officers do save a number of lives. Okay, I'm not into giving figures, and I wouldn't do, but I would say that scores of life are saved by the intervention that the chaplains have and the police officers subsequently have around that. So that leads me to a lot of the things that we do as well is around mental health. So we as local officers will get involved, on a low level thing about those that are vulnerable and have mental health. So we put in referrals to mental health teams. Yes, we're not experts in it. I keep trying to tell people we're not experts in it, and there are other agencies that are, but sometimes we have to get involved. So a lot of our work we do around supporting people in vulnerabilities and mental health that the public don't see. So I spent many hours with people in their houses who want to harm themselves or end their lives, and actually getting the right support for them. It's not right for me to leave. So that's what slightly frustrates me when the member public says, well, I haven't seen you for a day or two. Well, it might have been that I had spent 7 hours with an individual the day before that was trying to end their lives, and I was the conduit in trying to get them that support. So there's a lot of hidden stuff that we do that a lot of people do not know about. Okay. So here we have alcohol, drugs, rough sleeping. Visible, isn't it, in Eastbourne, as in any other town, and a lot of people are saying to me it's getting more visible. So we do a lot of work around those that have addictions that are visible in the street community, rough sleepers, and first and foremost we do a lot to try and get them off those things. So you'll be surprised the amount of police officers and PCSOs that get involved with individuals that try and direct them to the right areas in relation to support. So believe me, we don't discriminate around that, and we actually try and support people, but also we've got to have a fine balance in relation to that and the antisocial behaviour they're causing and the effect it's having on members of the public and those tourists that see it visible. So in relation to alcohol, in Eastbourne we have a public spaces protection order in place throughout the year from the council, which basically says that you can drink in public, but if it's connected with antisocial behaviour, then you can't, and PCSOs and police have powers to remove that alcohol. So I get into quite a lot of confrontation around the street community by actually removing alcohol from them. So you can understand that being out there on foot, you get involved with a lot of stuff, and it's actually trying to persuade people and doing the right thing, but it's quite sometimes difficult to actually talk to someone that actually is quite drunk in relation to that. So I get asked a lot of things around what we're doing about street drinking and other bits and pieces. We do a lot around street drinking. And what I say to street drinkers is this, because we build up a relationship with the local ones, but we do get out of town people come in quite regularly, more so than now, is you're going to drink, but drink where it doesn't cause any antisocial behaviour and affects local businesses and community. So we try and disperse areas like you walk through town, you see a lot of visible drinking that actually puts people off. And it's my hometown as well, okay? And I don't want a lot of the time for my wife and family to feel, vulnerable walking through town. So with the resources that we have, and sometimes we do days of actions, we do a lot around trying to resolve issues around alcohol and the street community. At the moment we have a lot of drug users, quite visible drug users around, and I get a lot of people contacting me directly around visible drug using, and I will try and disperse that as well. We have had quite a lot of serious illnesses with drug users recently in relation to a bad batch of heroin that's been around. So addictions and antisocial behaviour often go hand in hand, and there's a lot of services out there trying to help these people with addictions, and believe me, we are trying to support them as much as possible, but I have a duty to our members of the public to actually prevent antisocial behaviour and actually affect businesses, because if it's affecting your livelihood, then that's wrong, I do think that's wrong. So there's a lot of, as you see, begging in town. So it's interesting, public's reaction to when we deal with beggars. So we would overtly stop people begging because it's still an offence under the Police Town Clauses Act. Because I know that a lot of these beggars have resources that they're not poor as poor. They don't need to beg. So oftentimes we get involved with them and ask them to put their begging away and ask them to move on. 50% of the public say thank you, 50% of the public say why are you doing it. So it's hard to draw a line, right? And I do this with my own personal heart around here, that I want to support those that are in absolute poverty, okay? But actually, a lot of times people don't know the story behind these people that we know. And it's right that members of the public try and support them, and I support the food bank, which is right, which is completely different, but actually we do a lot of things in relation to poverty. But visible begging, actually, a lot of people don't want in relation to the effect it has on the town, so we have to draw a fine balance, but it's another one that there's a 50-50 split in relation to that, and the public support for us or against us. And it's very interesting how people think they can be very verbal about what we do, and suddenly they become police officers themselves, having never been police officers in the past, and they know everything better than us. But again, we do a fine balance. So a lot of people that I take alcohol off or stop begging, I go and see them later where they are, where they're living, and speak with them one-on-one, try and build a relationship with them and say, how can I get you support if you're not support? And link them with the relevant charities around Matthew 25, around the Salvation Army that actually they might not know about. So you might just see it on the street, those robust policing, right, and them taking away their alcohol, and they need it because of alcohol. But you don't see behind the scenes what we do later on in relation to that. And I try and follow up as much as possible and actually have... actually build a relationship with these people to try and actually help them and support them in relation to their addictions. But it's a big problem nationally, and it's a problem locally. A seaside town would have more issues than a town like Lewes. I know it's bigger, but a seaside town attracts people, county lines, in relation to drug use, drug dealing. And it's sad, isn't it, how many people... We had an issue around the back of the NCP car park with drug dealing, and we got the drug dealer, and he was only 16. Only 16. I think that's sad. I really do think that's sad. And my heart goes out to them, but actually we've also got to stop the drug dealing that's taken place. So a lot of our stuff is in relation to tackling visible antisocial behaviour, street community, drug dealing and drug use. And rough sleeping is another thing. You see a lot of tents around, and there's some around the pier at the moment which we're working on with the council. So we work very strongly, and that's the thing that I get across with our other partner agencies. And Grove Road, we actually share the same office with the council. So we do a lot of work around trying to reduce rough sleeping and get people housed, but also to remove visible rough sleeping, right, if it's causing antisocial behaviour. So a lot of tents we have to remove sometimes and other bits, but we work very, very strongly. But you will see tents now coming up everywhere. So I'll go in, speak with that person, try and get their identity, and actually then, refer them to the Rough Sleepers Initiative, which is another agency, and actually try and get them away from rough sleeping. But the council will remove some tents, particularly if it's on public land, to avoid rough sleeping. But we probably have 25 to 30 rough sleepers in Eastbourne. Some sleep in refuse bin areas and other bits, and I think that's sad as well. Again, we try and support them, but that's a lot of the work we do in relation to antisocial behaviour. The reason I put that up is because we do a lot of work also around missing people. Now, I did a check on the Meads, Lower Meads area in the last 2 months. We've dealt with about 60 missing people in this area, just in the Meads, Lower Meads. So that's a lot of our time that a lot of people don't see. Some are low risk, some are medium risk, but a lot of high risk. So I could be taken away from my area to actually help Hastings look for a high risk person that has been missing for 6 hours, and they're in fields and they don't know where they are. So a lot of the time we're not on our areas because of missing people. So we get a lot of dementia people missing. A lot of them have tags, but a lot go missing. A lot go missing from Eastbourne District General Hospital that we have to find. So in addition to all the stuff that we do a lot of work around missing people and trying to locate missing people. And it's great when you find people, particularly those most vulnerable. And we feel it. If someone is lost and they're in real danger, we feel it. and it's a great thing that when we find them, and technology is very good. You got your phones and all that can map you, right, and other bits and pieces. Technology is very good, but for the family to say that we found someone that's missing, particularly, so those are the things you take home. Actually, by what we've done, we've made a big difference. But I often do walk a lot around the seafront because a lot of people say I'm at the pier or along the seafront and I want to go into the sea and they're missing, so I do a lot of work around that, and we just use a helicopter sometimes when we can't. We have a helicopter for Sussex and Surrey and Kent Police when we need to, but a lot of our work that a lot of people don't know is around missing vulnerable people. So there's a picture of a bank. Not that we do bank robberies, but this is about scams. It's not an age thing scam. My son was scammed through PayPal when he was 21 for £2,000. So a lot of our work also is done around scams and visiting people that have been subject to scams. And why I put a picture of the bank is a lot of our work comes through the bank, and I think that's fantastic. Because say 12, 13 years ago, the banks never used to contact us at all through data protection about someone that's gone in, maybe elderly, that wants to withdraw £30,000 for a new car, when it's clearly they can't drive or shouldn't be driving, or £30,000 for their grandchildren, and the alarm bell should ring. But they, because of data protection, if it's called the Data Sharing Act, it'd be a lot better, wouldn't it? But data protection, but we did a lot of work with the banks. So a lot of our work as PCSOs, we do banking protocol jobs. So we go into banks because they say, I've got a vulnerable person here that wants to send £10,000 to Cambodia for someone they've met online, and we think they're vulnerable. So we go in there, speak with them, find out that it's a scam, and then do a lot of work in protecting them, speaking with their family and other bits and pieces. So that's a lot of work we do, and that's something you can share with everyone. And I'm happy for any groups that you have, that you're involved with, for me to come in and give you a talk on scams. Because the biggest one at the moment is romance fraud. And I think that, so I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke to someone he's out of force. He was on holiday here, went to the Metro Bank, so it's not linked to here. But he, over the past 6 months, has sent £80,000 to someone that lives abroad that wants to marry him. They don't exist, or if they do exist, they're not like the people that they do. And I speak to them, and I try and reason with them. And a lot of these are vulnerable because they've just lost, been widowed. But the sad thing is, some people say to me, I know it's a scam, but I'm lonely. And at least I've got someone to speak to. I think that's sad, isn't it? So romance fraud is a bit, and a lot of people, particularly the older generation, are very trusting. So if someone purports to phone up from the police, they will believe it's the police. So we still get people phoning up, I'm Police Sergeant so-and-so from the Met Police, we believe your card's been cloned, we need some details from you. You put your phone down, phone 999 just to make sure we're genuine, and you'll be fine. So they keep on the phone, they put the phone down, they phone 999 speaking to the same person in a different accent. So they then will withdraw or try and withdraw money. So when these first came out, we had people withdrawing sometimes because they say, well, all your money's corrupt in your bank now, or your bank's corrupt. They're withdrawing £35,000, £40,000 in cash and giving it to a courier thinking it's the police, and them losing £40,000. That very rarely happens now because the bank do so much work with us, which I think is good. But there are still lots of vulnerable people out, and a lot of people who think they're tech savvy and safe on IT and all that. So there's a whole lot of stuff that we can do in relation to reinforcing scam awareness. And I think it's so sad when people's life savings have gone through someone that doesn't even exist, really. And, pass a message. And if you think I've done some scams in people's, in homes, in residential homes and all that, and actually been there in their coffee mornings, and sometimes you can see a light bulb moment thinking, I've been subject to a scam. And that's why crime's changed. That's crime, when I joined, the crime of choice was a burglary. So The good criminals did a burglary, house burglary. That is a desperation crime now, because you're more likely to be caught with ring doorbells, forensics. So those who do burglaries are basically people that need desperate money for drugs. So burglaries have reduced. In Hastings one year there was 1,100 burglaries, there's probably about 60 now, okay? Where people get their money is through frauds. That's why policing has had to change, all right? And a lot of people, that's not visible policing, but units have had to be set up to actually reduce the amount of, and actually protect the victims that are online, because that's where all the money's laid, because you can hardly get it back if it's going abroad, and people are, 70, 80,000 pounds. So if I can help in send, and you can help in sending that message, please do. Just send it, online, the dating app. Well, I met them through a dating app, and it's all fine. Well, it's not, right? Particularly if they ask after 3 days, can you send me £3,000 through because I want to have a flight to come and see you, or I've got childcare issues and all that. And even a person that went to an airport to meet her in a foreign country, and she said she couldn't come because she was kidnapped on the way, they believed, because they're so involved in that. They are so involved in that. So that's another thing that we do in relation to frauds and supporting people and helping people and put them in touch with the right people that can help them. So I do a lot in all my schools in the area. So that's St John's Meads School. So most PCSOs will go into their schools and do a lot of work. Now, there are schools officers, but they're mainly secondary schools. So there are schools officers, part of our neighbourhood policing teams, that will go into all the schools, but we do all the primary schools. So I have a day in St John's every year, which means I do all classes, which is exhausting but fantastic. So I go from reception to year 6 to year 5, and it's always very difficult to pitch where you are in relation to that. But it is fantastic that they meet the police at an early age, because oftentimes their thoughts about police are very negative and what's ever happened in their life. And sometimes the only time they meet police is when they come into their house and there's a domestic incident and things like that. So I always say to the local school children that I do, whenever you see me, say, "Hi, Dan," all right? So about a week after my first input, I think we were in town, and there were all St John's School on some sort of school trip, and they saw me, and about 70 pupils at the top of their voices shouted, "Hi, Dan," so much the teachers had to tell them to be quiet because they were causing a disturbance in the town centre. But that's good, because they recognise you and they remember you. So I do a lot of work with Eastbourne College. I do a lot of work with St Andrews. I go in there and do some presentations. And they vary what I do, but actually them coming face to face with the police. Because what frustrates me, and please, all right, you may have said it before, is when I walk the streets and children are messing about, their parents say, "You better watch out because he's going to take you away." Now, I think that's a natural thing to say sometimes, but actually they come terrified of us, okay? And actually I always challenge that and say, no, we're there to help. So when a kid's lost and they see a police officer, they think they're going to take him away, and they go to another member of public. And we do a lot of stuff around stranger danger and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of our work is done in the schools. So there's more to just walking the beat, isn't there, that we do. So this is a big slide for me. This is about well-being, welfare. I was trained in welfare support for officers as an officer, and one of the reasons why I came back was to continue doing that. Because I know a lot of people have negative thoughts about officers and other bits and pieces, and why haven't they come and they haven't done. But what officers and staff on the front line see and witness affects them. When I joined, it used to be social clubs in every bars in every nick, and people after shift used to go up and drink quite heavily sometimes and talk about things, and that was their well-being. And really and truthfully, you weren't encouraged to talk about stuff that we witness. There's a lot of stuff I don't remember, thankfully. But I would say that every time I pass a particular place in Hastings, in Bexhill Road, I get an immediate flashback to what I witnessed and dealt with 25 years ago. And those things can start collating if you don't speak about them. So I wanted to become what we call a sort of a well-being officer and do sort of post-traumatic stress debriefs for people that have been through traumatic incidents. So what this job has allowed me to do is do more of those, because I was tired with the roles I had before, but actually I've done more in the last 18 months than I have, and it's just sitting with officers, speaking through stuff that they've witnessed, bad accidents, child matters. You know what things have happened in your own family, and police officers have come in, we deal with, you never know. So always think that if you see a police officer, and you think they might be a bit grumpy and all that, and yes, they might be, but just remember what they might have just been to. And they've been through some really difficult things. And we've shed tears together. We've, laughed together. And what I would say is, there is nothing like a police family. So I could go with it. I've some incidents I've been with officers 20 years ago, never talked about it since, but we got that bond. Because we know that we've been through there and we've got each other's back. And Giles York used to say that in relation to a Trivial Pursuit board, you remember the Trivial Pursuit, you get various pies, coloured pies to put in. There's nowhere else you can get blue pie but in the police. And so when I retired, I actually missed the camaraderie and the support that we have with each other. So I thought, about time I came back and was able to offer that support to the officers. So, the difference that makes with officers, and there is a whole lot of support network for the police in relation to well-being, in relation to counselling and things like that, because it's a unique job. And if you've been in emergency services before or any other job, it's a unique job that you see things that no one else sees it. They average, a police officer, normal member of the public, whatever normal is, okay, would have average over a lifetime, a 70-year time, 5 or 6 traumatic incidents in their lifetime that they've witnessed. A police officer, they've worked out, has 500 to 600 for a full 30 years. So we've shed a few tears together as police officers and police colleagues, but we're all there to support each other. I think that's vitally important.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you very much.